Welcome to another episode of Exit Philosophy. He's Mal Rahman and I'm Rich Griffin, and we're ready to go. I mean, spring seems to be coming around more than just spring training. The weather's warming up, the
It's
snow's
sprung.
into the basement. Yeah, it's great.
It's
But
beautiful. There's nothing better than just early spring training games when it's there every day for you. Now, in about a week, it's going to be so monotonous, and the end of spring is just, oh my gosh. But
yeah,
early spring is just such a treat. Just even here when, there's a game on somewhere, you know what I mean? Just
yeah,
feels
but you're talking from a personal standpoint of being down there and working and being, and
maybe.
I know exactly the feeling. You get fired up for the start of games because you're watching guys throw in the bullpen,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden the game start and you're pumped even in the seventh to ninth innings when your triple A and double A guys are throwing, guys you don't even know who's throwing,
You
and
even
you're
think
in
your hitting
charge.
coach is, you even think the hitting coach is going to help.
Yeah, that's we'll get into that. But
But you're right. And then, of course, the last couple of weeks of spring, as you know, is you're not to complain, but it does get a little monotonous for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, especially. Yeah, we'll get into all that stuff. But
Yeah.
the one thing that won't go away is the spin-off, the ripples from the Four Nations Cup, Four Nations Face-Off.
It's
Matthew
still out
Tkachuk,
there. I know it's still
yeah, no,
going.
something comes up all the time. Matthew Tkachuk, who was injured at the tournament, which sort of lends a separate issue into whether they're going to be able to play it every 2 years, every 4 years, or never again. But he said that the NHL fixed the tournament, fixed the final in favor of Canada because the referees weren't calling penalties. In fact, I do believe Canada went the entire final without a penalty, even though there was clearly too many men on the ice with about 4 minutes left that they didn't
Oh,
call.
no doubt. I mean, I remember texting you before the game and just saying, this is going to be one of those game sevens where the refs refuse to call penalties. And I think the one they did call was just the most blatant trip, and an accidental one on the US that they had to call it. But 100%. But I mean, Matthew's doing a lovely troll job, and they're on a personal tour for uh, being they're injured, and I mean, it's good for the game, honestly. But this is to me, this is Matthew already setting it up for the Olympics. He's already greasing the wheels and getting the interest and making sure everybody's
It's
aware of
almost
what's
it's
going on.
almost like wrestling the way that they're
It
talking
is.
the game and um
Yeah, setting up the next
you've
WrestleMania, baby.
you've seen that happen in MLB, in NFL. You see it happen everywhere.
Well, complaining about officials is old as time, and we got screwed routine. I mean, like say, I remember even like it's just human nature. We'd go into Yankee Stadium, and the whole theory was you don't get the calls. There's too much pressure, and the umpires are intimidated by whoever, Joe Torre, the Yankee crowd. And you talked yourself into that pretty easily as an opponent. There's no question.
Just want to get into spring training now and the impact of Max Scherzer. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot always made about a veteran, a future Hall of Famer coming in, and it depends on the makeup of your existing roster. I'm sure it's not as impactful with the LA Dodgers, who believe and who hype all their guys as all being future Hall of Famers, and I hate them for that. But
Even though they might be right. Yeah.
no, what you saw with the Max Scherzer impact with the entire rotation 2 through 7 hanging on the rail, watching the way he goes about his business, that has to have some sort of a positive impact, I would think.
I mean, it never can hurt. I mean, sure, and anytime you get that kind of, experience success, it's going to filter down. However, I mean, this is a veteran rotation. I mean, I don't know if Kevin Gausman's going to change the way he operates at this point, or Barrios or Bassett. But I mean, younger guys for sure. Maybe something Bowden Francis can pick up at his age. It can't hurt. That's for sure. And it's always it's something just to observe some of the greats that have done it and how they operate and the respect. I think the respect they get is something as somebody who's been in the game or watches the game, I think I just like that more than anything. It's just you show respect to a guy of that stature. Even Schneider's doing it. You know, Schneider's
Yeah.
like laughing about he doesn't know how to act in front of Scherzer type thing. I just think that's kind of that's baseball. There's more respect there, I think, because there's so much downtime,
Yeah,
and I just love that about the game. You know what I mean?
you mentioned Bowden Francis, and I think he's a perfect example because he's not a young guy. He's 28
No,
years old, but he's
it's now or never.
inexperienced. He's not young, but he's inexperienced. And
Yes,
he hasn't established himself, but he's had success. He's had some success, and it was
yeah,
amazing last year what he did in
back end
that
of the year. Yeah.
short stretch of 9 starts. So he might be a perfect guy to be influenced and take him not to the next level. That's a cliche, but take him, ratchet him up a little bit in terms of the total package that is Bowden Francis, and they're going to need him to succeed.
The total package is Bowden Francis. Words
That
not
is
off.
Bowden
Yeah,
Francis.
yeah. I mean, hey, this is his career, to be honest with you. You know, these stories are great, and it's obviously critical for this team that he's a guy that stays in the rotation and gives them some decent innings. You know, I think it's a lot to expect him to be the guy he was down the stretch, you know, as they say about September baseball and spring training. But I mean, you could see how he could be effective. So I think that's one of the key stories of this season is Bowden Francis, strangely enough, because they didn't do much to get support for him either if things go poorly.
I used to be a big fan of don't pay attention to spring training, don't pay attention to September baseball,
Yeah.
and don't pay attention to winter leagues. Well, guys don't go to the winter leagues anymore. They go
No,
to
it's a different landscape.
social club, which is the Arizona Fall League, where they all meet afterwards and go to whatever, a couple of bars that they all hang out. But that's not making a man out of you like the winter leagues did.
Right.
And September to me has changed because of the number of wild card spots that are available and teams
Mhm.
that believe in September that they're still in it. So it's not as much of a two teams are paying attention and the rest don't. You can't tell how you're doing in September or how a kid's doing because he's facing teams that don't care.
Yeah, and we don't have full 40 mans in September where you're
Right,
playing
exactly.
like that. So it's right. It's a different world. So that's a very valid point, obviously. September's different.
One thing I love about, and I think we differ slightly on it, about Max Scherzer is his hatred for robo-ump. And not
Yes, I love
robo-ump,
Max.
full-fledged robo-ump, but even the challenge system. His feeling is that if each team has two challenges, that if you lose two challenges, you're done for the game. He says it balances out, so why not just let the humans call? What's your feeling on that? Because sometimes a guy like Max Scherzer or a guy like Pete Rose or guys that Frank Thomas, they get calls that Robo Ump isn't going to give them. And that's
I,
why a guy like Max Scherzer might be advocating that he loves the human touch.
well, I've said this before, and me and Max are buds. Then I hate everything about the use of that. I don't like replay to start with. I cannot stand. This is such a drastic change to the fabric of a game. Again, we're always after this black and white answer. Yes, correct, absolutely indisputable. You know, it's A or B when the beauty in life is always in the gray. Why do we have to suggest that the strike zone is a specific thing? Like it is here to here to here. How about it isn't always that? It's in the the eyes of the umpire. Obviously, it's a specific area, but it's hard to even describe. So there's an art and a flow and a beauty to the battle between a catcher, an umpire, and a pitcher and a hitter. And I think the game is better when it's not defined so black and white. And we're always after this perfection that is unattainable. And it's just a different, then you get into different arguments in a different situation. And like you said, if you're going to do it the whole way. It's either right or wrong. If you're after right or wrong, you can't have two challenges. Just replace them, you know?
Yeah,
But the game
I
will be. significantly different. We talked the catching, it's not the same game, and it's just there's no need for it. There's no need for it.
I mean, there are some umpires who might look at me and go, "Hey, is that the same Griff who used to rip us as umpires when there was no replay?" When there's a
Oh,
story I got to tell you about Bruce Fremming, who was the
oh yeah.
most veteran of umpires and a red ass. He hated media. He hated everything.
Yeah.
Um, so I was doing radio at the time whenever Dave Van Horn and Kenny Singleton or Duke Snyder, I think it was, went to TV, I would do radio. So we were in Philly and I was doing a game and the umpiring crew for the next day had already arrived in Montreal, so they were listening to the radio. And one of the umpires had said, I don't know why everybody's complaining. We get 95% of the calls right. So being a stats guy,
Yeah.
I figured out that with all the balls and strikes and the plays on the bases, that he was admitting to 25 to 30 mistakes a game, which which I brought up on air on radio.
Wait, I'm
The umpires were listening. So the next day,
25 mistakes. Of
oh, yeah, that's all right. They're admitting to 25 mistakes
course,
per game.
just it's their own math, Rich. It was their own math.
95%, that's good. So
Yeah.
the next day I get to the ballpark and Claude Lavoie, who is a provincial police guy, but he also ran the umpires room. He sends me a message that Bruce Fremming wants to see me, and I go,
Okay.
uh-oh.
Ruh-roh. I'm
And,
sure he just wanted to say hello.
oh,
Yeah.
hell no. I sat there for 10 minutes while he stood over me and pointed his finger, and he was yelling at me for being a PR guy who's got no right. I'm part of the game. I shouldn't be ripping the umpires and blah, 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 blah.
No way.
But yeah, so I'm the same guy now who's saying, yeah, we need those umpires to be making those 95% correct calls.
Well, and the funny part is, I think you're 100% right, and that's been my approach. I think the answer is right in the middle for me. How about we focus on the quality of the umpire and how we operate as far as it shouldn't be a job for life when you get an umpire. You should always be evaluating. There should be a certain rotation each year of guys coming up from AAA, replacing guys in the majors. And that way you are worrying about the quality of the umpire first, as opposed to giving them a crutch where we're going to robo umps. So the game would be significantly better if the umpiring crew was the best in the world, like the players are,
Yeah.
because they're not. I'd worry about that angle because I've watched AAA umpires come up and they're damn good.
Yeah.
They're on top of everything. And it's easy to get complacent when you don't have any fear of accountability.
Yeah. If it turned out that Major League Baseball went to the two challenge per game system, I'd be less irked than I would if it went to the full robo ump because then we've talked about it before. How do you get umpires in training, even at the youth levels, to care about calling balls and strikes when their ultimate goal is to get to the big leagues where you don't have to call balls and strikes?
Yeah.
It makes no sense. And how do you tell who the best umpires are? If a guy's not good at balls and strikes, could he still be a good major league umpire?
Right, right. And the problem is you go to the two challenge system, you're on your way to the full. It never stops, as you know. We just add more rules and add more replay and add more calls and add until it's electronics everywhere.
Yeah.
Like
But I
I
mean, the challenges where only the pitcher, the catcher, and the hitter can call, and it's just a 2 seconds in, tap on the helmet. Um, and then it immediately goes up and you see it's like tennis when you watch the serves that are out or the forehands down the line and the guy challenges. It's quick. That's why I don't think going to a full replay would be great. I think it has to stay this way, if at all. And even though I'm a dyed in the wool traditionalist, it's coming. Some form of
It
it.
is coming. I
Yeah.
just I'm with you. I wouldn't mind the two challenge system. It's just what it's going to lead to is what I don't like. Um, it's the inevitable where it's headed and how it changes the game, and I don't think it's ever for the better.
Yeah.
That's my.
So now the spring training rosters, and as a former PR guy, and I've been on both sides of that fence, PR and media. When you're working on your media guide in the off season, and you see like 58 players invited to camp, your job is to hype them and make them sound all like they're capable of making the team. Um,
And
and we
you're
all know
writing
that's
bios, and you know they have
yeah.
no chance. They're just going
Yeah.
to appear in the guide.
There was a kid, Tony Scott, who passed away
Yes,
recently.
Tony
He
Scott.
was an
Yeah,
outfielder, switch hitter, and
right.
in the media guide I wrote, reminds scouts of a young Joe DiMaggio. And it ran in the press guide, and I'm going, oh my God, I feel so
Even
bad.
Tony's even Tony Scott's like, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
No, Tony was going, who's Joe DiMaggio?
Not a boy, Griff. And
But guys, I mean, the point being with the 50 to 60 men invited to camp, you know that it takes care of itself. By the end of camp, there's not that many decisions to be made. What are some of your experiences and just guys that really showed at camp and then had to be cut?
yeah, there was very, very rare that there was a legitimate competition in spring training for a roster spot. I mean, I there was a couple of times, where guys were battling it out for that 25th man spot or the last, spot in the bullpen type thing. But I mean, at the end of the day, as you go about these things, it mattered so little as time went on because the transactions that come quick, fast, and furious. You know what I mean? Um, and guys made the team, and then 2 days later they were sent away. Back in the day, it mattered when you made the team. You know what I mean? So most guys, you already know, regardless of performance, you kind of know who's going to make your club, and the spring is about everybody getting ready, and just like I said, transactions happen so frequently. It's about having the depth and the guys in the organization, um, and having them just available to you because they'll be in and out and up and down and starting 2 days in type thing.
Yes, sometimes I feel bad having even written. For instance, I wrote something on about the depth of the bullpen, left-handers, and even the bullpen itself. And when the Jays signed Jacob Barnes recently, he had been with the Jays in 2021. And I looked at his record, his stats, and he's been with 9 major league teams. He's been released 8 times, which means he was signed as a free agent 8 times. And he was picked up on waivers twice and traded once. And he goes into his first game and he throws 25 pitches on the other day, and he didn't record an out. He got 25. There's a reason he's been on 9 major league teams and now
Right.
working on a repeat with the Jays, which isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Um,
He's one of the 4A guys, right? You know
then
what I mean?
I wrote maybe not even. Then
Oh, maybe not even.
I wrote about all the left-handed candidates. And Mason Fluharty's a homegrown guy, and he took care of himself. He went out and couldn't people out that he needed to get out. And then Richard Lovelady, who looked pretty good when he faced the Jays with the Tampa Bay Rays. But instead, he goes out and he drills Bryce Harper with a 1-2 pitch up on the shoulder. And then he looks like his dog died. You know, he's wandering around the mound holding his head. And Bryce, it's funny because Bryce Harper, the first day that he played for the Phillies after signing as a free agent at spring training, there was a kid who came over on the bus to Clearwater, Trent Thornton, who was a non-roster guy.
Right.
And first pitch Trent throws in first at bat to Bryce Harper. He hits him in the toe and he's limping around. Harper's limping around. The crowd of 3,000 is going crazy. And they pull Harper from the game. So that's his debut as a Philly, being hit in
That's
the
right.
toe by Trent Thornton. And like Thornton was distraught. And we were in the clubhouse. That was my first year as PR guy. And Thornton was in the clubhouse, and there were death threats coming down. We're going to kill that guy. We're going to kill him. And so, of course, you know the deal as a PR guy. They made me walk with him between him and the crowd so that if there was a bullet or a rock,
You'd
I
take the
was taking.
hit.
Yeah,
The Secret Service.
that's where we stand as PR people.
That's our value. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And I was carrying about 10 extra
I didn't
pounds.
tell
So
you
I was
they had actually called me up to see if I could make the next plane in case you got hit. I was on standby.
Yeah. Yeah. That told me immediately. Coming up the ramp from underneath the Clearwater Stadium to the bus,
Yes.
there
Yes,
were
yes.
like
I'm familiar with it.
50 hooting fans, and I'm like there shoulder to shoulder with Trent on the
Standing
inside.
tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and last thing before we get to the topic du jour, Larry Dolan, owner of the Cleveland Indians slash Guardians, passed away at 94. Bought the Indians in 2000 um, from Jacobs. I guess it used to be Jacobs Field, and then they changed it. But
Right.
Dolan's
Right.
his family, and you know the best thing was changing the name from the Indians to the Guardians, and he was overseeing that. Worst thing was sending Shapiro and Atkins our way. But
That's a very smart man, apparently.
the topic of the day, Bo. We're sick and tired of talking about Vlad all the time.
Yeah, and it's going to
So
be all year, right? So
yeah,
it's never going away.
we'll talk about Bo Bichette. Um, and he's in a different category than Vlad because would you say that, given what has happened to him and what he's done, that 6 years at 25 a year is about right for what he might expect with maybe
Yeah,
so
yeah,
like 150 for 6 years.
and clearly he's going to try to play his way into something better. You know what I mean?
Right. And
He's
the Jays don't want to negotiate with him at this point. Obviously, they haven't even spoken to him and his reps, but they are also interested in seeing whether he can bounce back and be the 190 hit guy and play a decent shortstop before they make any offer. And if he does that, the offers might bump up. So they're in another catch 22
it's,
situation.
they haven't talked to him probably because he told them not to talk to me anymore. You know,
Well,
you break
yeah,
up with somebody.
you got that. You got that possibility.
There's no point making an offer when he's turned down several on the way to this point. You know what I mean? Let's be honest. I mean,
So,
you
so
can,
we
so
have a list. We have a
yeah,
list that we put together of every team and their starting shortstop, how many years they have left with that team, and the salary they're making in 2025. And we came up with, not together, but individually, we came up with teams that heading into the off season of 25, 26. So for opening day of 2026, might be interested in Bo Bichette as their starting shortstop. Um, I mean, we can as we talk about the list, we can talk about other teams that have shortstops that they're not going to bump, that they're clearly
right.
satisfied with. I mean, you got St. Louis with Wynn. San Francisco just signed Adames. You've
Yep.
got Philly with Trey Turner,
Lindor.
and you got the Rangers with Corey Seager. Yeah, so there's plenty of teams, but there are some teams that would very much be interested in a player like Bo Bichette if he has a bounce back year. Who's topping your list?
Well, I think there's two teams that scream at you. For me, number one would be the Boston Red Sox. I mean, I think Trevor Story was done before he got to Boston, to be honest with you. Um, and they're trending upwards, I would say, with showing that they're willing to get back into the market a little bit. And depending on the season goes, I think he's an absolute natural fit for that club, that infield, and what they're doing there. And the other one is the Atlanta Braves. You know, I mean, with what they've got just and how they are always in the mix there. And with Alex, I don't think they'll be going anywhere soon. He'll always be in the mix. There's a lot of reasons I think it'd be appealing to both sides. Those are the two that top my list. What about you?
That's
And
funny.
they've got openings
Yeah.
they'll have.
Well, that was important. That's why having the complete list of
Yeah.
30
Yeah.
shortstops and who's there right now is important. But topping my list, the top two teams are Boston and Atlanta.
hmm
So we're
No
thinking pretty
way.
much the
Get
same.
out of here.
But
Well, again, that's why I said it screams at you.
yeah,
Like, who's going to want a spot with some, you know,
Trevor Story with Boston is 32 years old. He's making 22.5 million this
and he's
year.
not going to.
He's got 1 year left after this. So signing a guy like Bo to a six, you could move Story because Story was set to play second base when Bogarts was there.
That's right.
And so it would not be a huge deal to move Story over for Bo. And you're going to have Bo for the next. Bo's your future shortstop if you're the Red Sox, and that's why he's up there. And then with the Braves, I mean, they've been making do with Orlando Arcia ever since Swanson left. Swanson was, to me, a lot like Bo, not just because of the flow, but um, because he's a young guy, talented and had more upside than he showed so far. And Arcia is just a placeholder. It's like
Yes.
Kramer at the Oscars or whatever it was, where he just would take
See?
empty seats. um,
Right. I mean, don't
but
think.
and then there's the Alex Anthopoulos factor. Clearly, has to be considered when you're talking about Bo and potentially being a Brave.
Yeah, and even though there's not to not bring it up, but I mean, I'm sure Alex would love to get into the Vladdy sweepstakes, even though he's pretty set with what he's got. I mean, Vladdy was his boy, right? But I think he'd have a lot of interest in Bo for sure, and it's just such a good fit. So I'm sure those. I'm sure those types of things have been discussed already, internally. I'm curious to see how that plays out. But I mean, what a year this is for Bo. And everybody forgets what a great player Bo has been. I mean, of course, the defense is what it is. He's average at best, but I believe you can win with Bo at shortstop. And you go back a year and it was Bo over Vladdy for most people. It was the other way around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so let's not dismiss Bo as all of a sudden he's just a guy. Like he's a highly motivated guy who can earn a lot of money in free agency if he gets back to leading the league in hits, where he's generally been in that area every year except last year. 200 hit guy. So.
I got three dark horse candidate teams that might be interested in Bo, and I'd like to hear your opinion on them. I mean, we obviously went through all the names, went through all the teams, but what about the Dodgers? They might want to get Mookie Betts off shortstop. I know they do. I know Mookie has more value as purely a hitter. He's got tremendous value. I mean, he's an MVP guy, but um,
I wrote them down too,
yeah,
uh, because clearly they can move guys around. Well, Betts is not a shortstop. Like he'll be fine
yeah.
over there, obviously playing it, but you can move Betts, and you've got room to bring in a shortstop. And yeah, I think I agree. I think that's a sneaky fit there. You know
Here's
what I mean?
one. Here's the other one that I'll give as a leading candidate, in my opinion. It's a team that is a mirror image, has been a mirror image of the Blue Jays for the last three seasons in terms of building a rotation, making do, needing more offense, and always looking and having the potential to be there. Seattle
Yeah.
Mariners.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
mean, they
say it
got
before you
J.P.
said it.
Crawford,
Yeah.
who has 1 year left, but they signed him midwinter. He's making $11 million, got 1 year left. and Bo to me would be a perfect fit.
Yep, I got them down too. I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, the only downside is for me, I mean, obviously the dollars are going to rule the day in a lot of cases, but I actually do believe after Bo's been here a long time, he wants to go somewhere to win, and that will Seattle fit that bill? You know what I mean?
Well,
I mean, he
they've
can go.
got a super strong rotation, but
They do.
it's much younger than the Jays rotation, so it has a chance to survive as a unit much longer than a team that's going to be losing Bassett, Berrios with a chance to opt out, Gosman with one more year. So yeah, I mean, Bo, if he was looking for a similar type fit, would and he'd have a huge fan base because we know how popular the Jays are in Seattle in the great Northwest. So
Right. I agree with that. I think that is an option. What else do you have?
I got just the free agents going into the offseason because competition at your position is probably important going into a free agent
It is very
offseason.
important.
I
Yeah.
mean, there are years where there was a year where there was a bunch of shortstops, prime time shortstops available. But going into this offseason, the list is fairly insignificant in terms of competition for Bo as a free agent. I mean, you've got just second base, shortstop, and even third base, because those are all, potential shifts of existing infielders. Because I don't think Bo wants to shift to second base,
Well,
or third
I
base.
was going to mention that. I think there's zero chance both shifts for a couple of reasons. One, he believes he's a shortstop. Two, that's where you make the money. And you shift when you're aging out. You know what I mean? When it's
Yeah,
time when you can't handle the shortstop anymore, and there's no chance Bo's mindset is there. And if you tried to do that, even with the Blue Jays, you don't get the best version of Bo, and you
yeah,
need the best version of Bo.
yeah,
That's important.
absolutely. And the only one of the 30 shortstops other than Bo going eligible for free agency at the end of the year is IKF with the Pirates. And Kiner Falefa is not a competition for Bo.
No,
And so that leaves on the other side of that argument is that leaves 29 teams with shortstops that they already have. But Bo is better, as we've discussed, than a lot of those existing shortstops, and I'm sure that their teams. So the list of free agents infielders is not deep. You got Urias, Urshela, Andujar, O'Hearn, Gleyber Torres, but none of these are shortstops, you know?
no, like he's sitting pretty if he has a good
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. So
Like,
that estimate of 6 years and 25 per year, 6 years, 150, that might go up if
well,
some.
it can go up if he
Yeah.
just has a standard Bo year. And I-
And the last thing on Bo is we've seen him bat leadoff a couple of games. I mean, he batted leadoff in the Max Scherzer start, and Scherzer hadn't even sat down yet, and Bo swung
oh,
at
it
the first
swung.
pitch and flied out to center. And now that puts the emphasis on the second place hitter to take some pitches, which isn't really fair that your leadoff guy has put your second place hitter in a hole like that. And your starting pitcher, a veteran like Scherzer, who might need a sip of Gatorade or to sit down and catch his breath, he's getting ready to go back out on the field if the second place hitter makes an out quickly. And
Yeah.
so I just think it doesn't match the type of hitter that Bo is.
No, he's a slasher and he wants to swing and he wants to do damage. And if it's the first pitch or the fourth pitch, he's swinging. He's not playing the long game, like you say, where he's trying to see pitches and work the pitcher that way. I mean, like not suggesting Bo doesn't ever do that, but Bo's going up there to do damage, and he's not letting a quality pitch go by, um, you know, to uh, to 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 get deeper into accounts generally. So I agree with you. I think you sit him in the number two hole, and unless something drastically changes, you leave him there. You just leave him there. And the guy who's the leadoff, they don't have a guy, but Springer can do the job. And then if it goes to Wagner, He's
Well,
got good plate discipline. You know what I mean? Like it fits
and
the bill.
the negative to going to Wagner, I believe, is that he's not going to be playing every day,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
therefore now you got to come up with an alternate leadoff guy. And I like you made that point a couple of weeks ago about Springer
Yeah.
being experimented with 4, 5, 6 in the lineup and in an RBI spot. And ultimately, they don't need spring training to tell them what George Springer can do as a leadoff guy. I mean, he's
No.
got like a track record of 7, 8 years doing that. So when you said that, I was going, but ultimately that might be the best solution because Bo's not a leadoff guy. If Springer slashes at the first pitch, then Bo understands batting
Correct.
second that he's going to have to take a couple of pitches.
Correct.
Um, but if he's in first, he's like a dog when you open the front door. They don't know. They just bound out into traffic, you know?
That's correct. That's correct.
So I think that ultimately what you said about Springer ending up in leadoff, and it may not be for the long term, but to
Right.
open the season,
Steady the season.
yeah, and with Bo second, Vlad third, Santander fourth, and then you mix and match after that.
And
You
then
know,
you might have somebody emerge that can take that. Maybe it is Wagner, and
yeah,
maybe it is someone else that you're like, okay, George, George can handle leadoff coming out of the gate for a month. You know what I mean? And let's not dismiss Springer either. It's like I
yeah,
said, regression, it isn't linear. It doesn't mean he's going to be worse than he was last year. I mean, he's George Springer. There is some guys have a rebirth a little bit or a
yeah.
little, run.
I,
He's not
I,
43.
yeah, and with Springer, I would, and I know that you go, well, what's the difference between left field and right field? But I would move him to left field. I mean, it was spoken about
Yeah.
earlier as a possibility. I just think that, for instance, when Barger, who's not the greatest outfielder or
No,
third baseman,
no.
when he
Cigar
played
ever.
the outfield, he had to play right field. I mean, his arm dictated that.
Yeah,
And so those were only days where Springer was either out of the lineup or DHing. And so why
right,
not just move him to left field, have him consistently out there? Um, yeah, so to me, that makes the most sense is have Springer in a fresh position and keep him in leadoff for the moment. But here's another topic. You mentioned Wagner several times. We talked about him being a potential leadoff. How about when opening day arrives? I've got this sort of alignment plan that there's still like 28 days before opening day as
right,
we record. Uh, so how about a DH platoon? Because you need upside. You need guys with upside.
right,
You don't need to know where the floor is for guys. And to me, the upside of a DH platoon would be Barger and Orelvis platooning in that spot in the DH because it used to be that a young player never wanted to DH because by the time he became a free agent, if he was identified as a DH, he would only have half the teams with which to negotiate
right. Yeah,
because
that too.
the National League didn't have a DH.
Right,
So that was the negative of being a young designated hitter. And that doesn't exist anymore.
right.
And in fact, you're probably better off with Elvis not having a glove on his hand, just
Which
a
is a
bat.
shame.
I
Shame that he's
mean,
one of the
watching
top
him play
prospects.
second base, he's like Manny Trio with the yips, you know. He sort of throws across his body, sidearm, underarm, and you're going, oh man, in the
I don't know how
clutch.
many people are going to get the Manny Trio reference there, but I like it. I like it a lot. So
So
you've got them at your DH spot, and
yeah,
then
and then
you're
uh,
doing the Wagner Clement at third.
Wagner Clement at third base, and in days that I mean, Clement, everyone understands that he's a major leaguer, a valuable major leaguer. But I think we both agree that his value as a major leaguer is more as an all-around guy who can play second, third, and short and play it above average extremely well defensively. But so to lock him in at third base is not an ideal situation for me. And
Well,
getting Wagner's bat in there against mostly right-handed starters, because that's what he's going to see, gets him the majority of at bats.
yeah, and the danger, like I mentioned to you before, I think people just don't think about it, is Clement doesn't hit lefties particularly well. It's righties better, and that's if you're pigeonholing him into a left-handed platoon role at third base, you know what I mean? You're getting Garth Orge offense, and that we don't play that in 2025.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? That player doesn't exist anymore. So you're right, Clement
Yeah,
move around. You know, like so that concerns me if that's the platoon that they go with
right.
because I'm not
Except
sure it's a good one.
I'm not a big fan of the splits from time to time, especially with a guy like Clement. I was researching Sandlin and his ability to retire left-handers, and everybody's going, "Well, you don't need a second left-hander." This is what a lot of feedback I got from a column I wrote about the need for a second left-hander. They
Yeah.
go, "Well, Sandlin gets left-handers out," and then I researched, and I'm at the All-Star break now. I'm not like a big computer guy, so I'm going game
No,
by
surely.
game.
Notebooks are flying
I'm
everywhere.
going
Yeah,
game
yeah,
by
yeah.
game. And the roster, the motley crew of left-handed hitters that they leave him in to face is why he's successful against left-handers. If one of the top left-handed hitters in the game is coming in and Sandlin's slinging from three quarters or three quarters low, he's coming out and a
Right.
left-hander's going in.
That's right.
So he's facing, I got a list of them: Blade, Seth Brown, McCann, Polanco, uh, Wallner, Willie Castro, Benintendi, Fletcher. These are guys
Yeah.
he's facing, you know?
Not George Brett.
Yeah. No, there's no George Brett in the group.
Well, and I think that's very good work by you because can he get lefties out? Yes. Is he your high leverage guy against lefties? You're crazy. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It's
absolutely.
not
I
going to
mean, you
go
don't
well.
leave him in to face one of the top left-handed hitters just because his splits from 2024
Yeah,
say he gets left-handers
yeah.
out.
You're not going here. You get Rafael Devers. You know what I mean? Like you're just not doing that
So
because that's
my point being that
they don't have one.
to examine Clement in that same light and say that he doesn't do well against left-handers. I mean, it depends who you're facing, you know?
It does depend who you're facing, but I guess my point is he's not a lefty masher where he's not your platoon perfect fit. He just is because in theory it sounds good. You know what I mean? He's more
Well,
valuable as a utility guy. Like he's
right,
more valuable in that role, moving around. You don't need to hide him against
correct.
right. You don't need to hide him.
But say the left-hander that he's facing is Tarek Skubal, and the right-hander he faces is Jacob Barnes. Would you expect him to do better against right-handers or left-handers in that situation? I think Ernie Clement would be really good against right-handers in that situation.
He'd probably put his hand up.
Yeah, I got him. I got him.
I'll take Barnes. I'll take the righty here. So, yeah, no, fair enough. But I think at the end of the day, Griff, I think if your suggestion probably makes the most sense for the club, and also, man, does that suck. I mean,
Yeah,
Wagner, Clement, Martinez, and Barger are your guys. Like that's not exactly improving the ball club and making a charge for a postseason berth.
yeah.
Hey,
Well,
hey, who knows? Who knows? Like there is upside, like you said. They Barger, Martinez, tremendous power. Like who you've got to try it. I like your thinking because there isn't anybody coming anyways. So I think your idea is the most logical. It's just sad.
well, you've got everyday players, and we all acknowledge that at first base, second base, shortstop,
Yep.
the three outfield positions once Varsho is healthy.
Yeah,
So,
they're set. They're set.
and you look, and are the Dodgers the only team that's loaded top to bottom in their lineup? everybody's got a situation like the
For sure.
Jays
You
have
can't
with
have it
these.
all.
And then at catcher, again, we're concerned about Alejandro Kirk's workload, which on TV the other day, Buck Martinez was saying that Schneider wants him to catch 110 to 120,
Oh shit.
110 to 115 games. Well, it's nice to say that we would like him to catch that many, but you still need a second because he's not going to catch that many. We know that. Um, so like who's going to be the backup guy who can catch 60 to 65 games? And for me, that's Christian Betancourt right now.
They are dangerously thin at the position.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say, hey, let's say Kirk goes down. I mean, who knows? But oh my gosh, like you've got a big problem. Or let's just say he's Kirk and he can only catch 100 games. He's not Johnny Bench back there. I know everybody loves him, but his value in defense comes from one thing, framing. He's not a catch and throw guy. You know what I mean? His power has seemingly been lost.
Yeah. He's a
So
bat to ball guy. That's all now. So,
he's okay if you got another guy.
yeah.
Like, and they don't have another guy. And I'm curious to see, I mean, they've got to sign somebody, Griff. They've got to put somebody else in that system
Yeah.
to
And
protect him.
I mean, the only thing about not having that guy at this point is that he's got to learn the pitching staff if you're bringing him in to catch that many games. He's got to learn the pitching staff.
Well,
And
it's
so
going to be Bethencourt, is what it is.
yeah, who
But
has
I
I
mean,
don't think he's been in a game yet. He might have caught late when I wasn't watching, but yeah. Um, so if you have that platoon and you have a second catcher and you have six guys that are starting every day, that leaves one roster spot. That
right.
leaves one
Back to
position
your
player
spring
roster
training
spot.
question.
So
Right.
basically, and you could, I mean, you could argue that
Probably
Barger and
goes to
Orelvis, neither or one or both might make the team. I think it's more likely the way that this front office and coaching staff thinks that they're not both good. They're not going to do that. They're not going to have uh,
somebody's in
a
AAA.
young DH platoon like that.
Yes, they're going to be playing in Buffalo, right?
But
Uh,
they can both play positions, which helps, you know.
sure.
Yeah, I mean Barger might be one of the dumber players that I've interviewed, but he can play, you know.
He's toolsy. He's
He's
toolsy.
toolsy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, right. We'll see how that goes.
yeah,
And don't forget Joey Loperfido. I mean, how
yeah,
about that? How about that attempt to
yeah.
catch that ball in center field the other day? Oh my
Yeah,
God.
I know. And that wasn't even mentioned on the
He
telecast. It's
almost
like,
finished himself
oh
there.
my
That
God.
that was some sort of effort.
Yeah. And I don't think
And
that,
he's on the team, right? So
yeah, he's a favorite of the front office favorite.
he
And
is.
I don't think it's great to brag about having Davis Schneider and Loperfido, who were the two top hitters at 14 years old in Eastern New Jersey. I don't think that's a selling point for having them on a major league roster.
Right,
Say.
right. Yeah. There's no major league team in Eastern New Jersey. So yeah.
The brings me now to the hitting coach, the new hitting coach,
Oh,
David
yes.
Hopkins,
The savior.
who has been extolled in features by Shai Davidi and
Sportsnet
now
people.
Keegan Matheson,
Oh, keep
as
it.
being like he wants them to be the most imaginative hitting group in baseball. He has this formula that he invented that Shai outlined, and I didn't get it. I didn't read it. I mean, I read the article, but I didn't.
That's probably how he got the job. The
Well,
form.
what about last year when Don Mattingly was going to give everybody a personal profile heading into games, and it was supposed to be the answer. And then Hunter Mentz, who was bringing his formulas from college, and Matt Haig, who probably would have been the best choice for hitting coach.
Correct.
And now he's the Pirates hitting coach.
Right.
Then Edwin, Victor Martinez, Guillermo Martinez. I remember Guillermo during COVID when we were doing Zoom interviews from Buffalo, and we needed somebody, and he didn't like the camera. He wasn't very
Yeah,
comfortable. And
sure.
so he came and we convinced him to do a Zoom call. And his 20-minute dissertation on hitting was brilliant. Like
I bet.
this guy knew exactly what he was talking about and personalities that he was working with. And I thought, wow, he's way better at this than I thought. But now he's just another also ran. Dave Hudgens, who is too busy charting Trump's progress in the election to
Yeah, he's feeling good these days, old Davey. Yeah, yeah. Congrats, Dave.
so this
Congrats.
Hopkins comes over from the Twins, and there's no explanation of why the Twins didn't keep him.
Oh, wait a minute. What about that part? Yeah, that's right. Forgot about
He's
that.
35 years old, younger than some of the hitters that he's working with. And we know that, and this is just me rambling. You can chime in after, but we know that guys reach the major leagues and they've all had their own hitting gurus growing up. And even if they're in the majors, they go home in the off season and they're
Yeah,
working with their guy.
yeah, yeah,
And so
correct.
like you get pretty much in their own mind, in the player's own mind, he's a finished product, needs a little tinkering here and there every once in a while, but he's not going to be reinvented. And that's what seems to be the process here, the thought process with the new hitting coach. And there's every new hitting coach, a team's supposed to feel that way. But what do you think is going to be the end result?
Well, I think the end result's going to be same, as all the other ones. New boss, same as the old boss. You know what I mean? Can they have an impact? Of course they can. I mean, like I said, it's human beings we're talking about. Like I told you, my belief is I think Matt Haig had a really big impact on Vladdy last year, strangely enough, um, which I find strange that he's not around anymore. But he's not going to change the entire landscape of the offense. Your players are what they are. Can he make a difference in some aspects? For sure he can. It isn't with some formula, I will tell you that. It's person to person, uh, talking about hitting, talking about pitch selection, talking about approaches. And is there a time when you need to go see a guy to get your swing in order, like a golf coach? Of course there is. Sometimes you don't realize you're out of sync and you're dropping your shoulder, you're doing all that stuff. But that kind of stuff, man, if you're thinking about that when you're playing baseball, you're toast or playing golf. So, you know, I, I find it again, it's another thing to distract from the realities of what's going on with the team. Look at this shiny new thing that's going to fix our problems. You know what I mean? And in fairness to all the media, hey man, you got to write stories. I mean, it's spring
Right. Yeah,
training,
no,
you know?
yeah, not blaming them for that. It's a good
No,
story.
no, no, no. But is it going to make a difference? No. You're going to hear about it, and then we're going to get to May, and it's going to it's just the same old, same old. And the problem, I do believe, is there's seven bloody guys, like you just said. Like the message is important. You can't have seven messages or whatever,
Yeah.
four or
But
five.
every player only goes to the guy that they trust the most.
Sure.
So out of the seven, you're picking your guy. And so when you see a player come off the field after an at bat, he might go to Victor Martinez, or he might go to Edwin, or he might, last year was a lot of Matt Haig they were going to.
Yeah. Yeah, until that doesn't work, and then maybe you try someone else. But
Yeah.
uh, I think you can get
I,
disjointed messaging, let's just say. You know what I mean? Because everybody's
yeah.
got their own theories.
Well, I think one of the issues over the last few years, maybe since that huge year that the team had, is that there's an expression, if you don't learn from history, then you're destined to repeat it.
Right.
And so this group was breaking in when they were all young and hammering the ball. And so now they study pitchers and how they approach them. That's the history from which they're learning. This is how he approached me the last time. But the pitchers learn from history too,
Right.
and they are adjusting to the last time they faced a certain hitter, especially now that they know that these guys are more veteran and they have their idiosyncrasies and the way they approach an at bat. So like pitchers are learning their history more than Blue Jays hitters are learning
But
from.
that's the story of baseball, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
about adjustments. It's what separates the great from the average guy, and it's what separates a major leaguer from a guy who might come up and have a cup of coffee, and then the adjustments get made, and they can't compete. That's the greats do that. I mean, and that's where the jury's out on guys like Bowden Francis and guys who are not sure. Can they make those adjustments once people study that new pitch and the new approach, and that's the beauty of the game. So, I mean, 100% right. Let's see how those guys handle that. I mean,
yeah.
you come up, have some initial success, and then guys are like, "Oh, I got to approach them this way," and then all of a sudden they can't handle breaking ball off the plate after 98 up and in. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You don't see that in AAA the same way you do with control.
I had I don't know why I'm off on this tangent now, but I had a history teacher, Father Moriarty, in high school, and he was like 75 years old and wore a robe. And his idea of teaching history was to write the lesson down on the chalkboard and have you write it down what he's writing down. He never really spoke his lesson, but I found that remembered more about history, the defenestration of Prague when they threw them out the window in the council meeting. I remember that. That was like 1352 or something.
Because
And
it wasn't a lecture.
Father Moriarty had this trick where he could hear talking behind him, know who was talking, and turn and fire a piece of chalk and hit the guy right between the eyes. I don't know why I'm thinking about that when we're
Wow.
talking about learning from
Yeah.
history.
He,
But
he should have been on a major league roster.
oh yeah, maybe that's
Like,
what I
this
was
is
thinking.
Steve Reich.
He didn't need no stinking video to know where the guy was sitting.
That's right.
Um,
That's
okay, two more items,
the original trouble with the curve.
right?
You can hear it.
This item is trading for depth, trading from your depth and for needs. And there's a danger if you're not going to sign Vlad for keeping him through even through the All-Star break through the end of the season. Same thing with Bo. And you obviously would get important parts back for those guys. I remember the Expos traded Gary Carter to the Mets and got four players who could help at the time. Rusty Staub was traded in 72 and got Singleton, Jorgensen, Tim Foley, three starting players. So,
Wow.
you're not emptying the roster if you trade important pieces. Plus, the Jays are so deep and not deep in guys that stand out in the infield, but trade pieces that the infield depth right now is led by Andres Jimenez, Bo, Ernie Clement, Barger, Leo Jimenez, Orelvis Martinez, Schneider, Wagner, Kasevich, Stefanik, Edinson Paulino, and McAdoo, and then Arjun Namala coming up quickly, a couple of years. So would you consider trading one or both of Bo or Vlad and throwing in a piece or two, maybe a Jacob Barnes,
The finishing touch. That's right. Richard
but
Lovelady. Richard
and
Lovelady.
getting ahead of the curve in terms of panicky move. Would you consider before the end of spring training moving one of those guys?
I'd move them both. I've told you that. I think it's malpractice if you don't move those guys. If you're looking after this organization, you have to move them. They are not signing here. You've tried, and it's not happening. So the benefit of keeping them and trying to make this run when you're not set up to make it, let's be honest. I mean, anything can happen, of course, but you're not primed to be a contender. It's malpractice if you don't move the asset and reload. Now, hey, let's be honest. You're not the management team doesn't have extensions right now, so it's a funny situation, and I understand that, but that's on ownership. That's on ownership. If you either, you know, lock these guys up if you believe in Mark and Ross, and they can change their approach to what this organization should look like 5 years down the road. And if you don't, you're even putting them in a tough spot because they know they cannot afford to have a poor season here. You have to move those assets, and they're good assets. You sure throw in some of that depth and get Tim Foley and Singleton and those type of guys, or the Grady Sizemore uh, trade in Cleveland type thing. Like you have to. It's your responsibility to do that. And the worst thing you can do is sit on it and hope you win while the asset depreciates every day that goes by. A little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more as you get to that trade deadline until it's zero if you keep them because you're 3 games out of the third wild card. You know what I mean?
So let's just examine this with dollars and cents. If you trade Bo and you trade Vlad, and at the end of the season, Max Scherzer leaves, you're paying 7.5 to the Pirates for IKF to play shortstop in Pittsburgh, and there's one more player, Bassett, who's going to be gone at the end of
That's
this.
right.
So those salaries add up to $90 million. Can you fill in? Like to me, Josh Naylor is becoming a free agent after this season. He's making $10 million now. He
Right.
can play first base for say $20 million next year. So and then shortstop, you've got a ton of them. You got Kasevich that everybody likes. You got Leo Jimenez. You've even got Ernie Clement if you want. Would that duo plus the extra money that you have to spend allow you to put a competitive wild card competitive team on the field in 26 without Bo and Vlad?
No, no. Those guys, they're not good enough. Now, like I said, you never know. Anything in this game is possible until you see guys play. But no, and then there's no need to do it, Rich. Why would
There's
you?
no need. How are you
No,
going to
no.
compete?
There's no need to let these assets go to zero
Oh,
and
okay. So yeah, so that's
count
why you're
on Leo
suggesting,
Jimenez and
yeah.
Clement. Like, come on, man. You know
So
what I
if
mean?
you're trading them before the season, then you're getting pieces, not necessarily shortstop piece, but maybe a first base piece where you don't need to sign Josh Naylor, and maybe a better outfield piece somewhere, although they like what they've got out there.
And
But yeah,
yeah,
I
like
I see what you're talking, and then even another starting pitcher, who knows?
And like I said, with all due respect, and like however you feel about Mark and Ross, this is on ownership. You cannot have your management team in this position where their jobs are on the line and needing to win while your two superstars are hanging in the balance. And if you trade them, you're not winning.
Yeah,
You know that. And if you hang on to them, the long-term future of the organization is damaged. And what you're going to fire them then? If
yeah.
do it now, do it now, or extend them. If you love them so much and they're still here, extend them because it it, it doesn't line up with your two core stars, and it needs to. They have to make sure they're doing the best for the franchise 5 and 10 years from now, and they're incentivized not to do that.
I
That's
know.
not their incentive.
Yeah, and the
It's on
bottom line,
Aaron
and
Rodgers and
we
you know.
we discuss it every week, but the bottom line is they cannot convince the fans that they're going into a 3+ year rebuild because they won't accept that.
Right. And certainly Mark and Ross can't afford that either.
Yeah.
They don't have contracts.
One last item before we wrap up this week's exit philosophy is the fledgling Niagara Ironbacks. How's that
Oh,
going?
right. Who forgot about them?
Yeah, no,
Even
you
though
didn't.
it consumes 24 hours. This is like my reprieve here,
Right.
this hour. Yeah, no. Kissing babies, shaking a lot of hands, making friends in the community. Obviously, we had the press conference last week. We are officially the Niagara Ironbacks, and can't wait to get that season started June 5th in Jamestown and June 7th, the first home opener. We are going like bat out of hell to get everything in order, doing a lot of logistical things, sponsors, liquor licenses, buses, like I told you before, baseballs, hats, and you know, we're going to develop this thing. Year one, we're probably going to go very simple with our jerseys and logo just because there's so much to do, and then we'll keep developing the brand as we go along. But things are moving at rapid speed, let's say.
One of these days, I want to be wearing for the YouTube version, the baseball hat from the with the stompers with the Ironbacks logo on it. And I was going to say that everybody knows where that stadium is, where your games are going to be played. The St. Catharines Stompers used to play there. Would you say that your area that you will draw from is like a 45-minute drive around that ballpark?
Yeah, and that's why we branded it Niagara. If
Yeah.
anybody knows, it's kind of way the area is going. Everything is you got the Ice Dogs, you got the Niagara River Lions, even the elite teams around Niagara North, Niagara South, Southern Tier. So if you pigeonhole yourself into one smaller area like St. Catharines, let's say, um, sometimes it's not as favorable to the
Yeah.
rest of the Niagara region. They don't see it as their team, and we want to be inclusive and we are obviously very big. We love St. Catharines. That's where we're playing, and obviously the community, the mayor, the city has been all in. But yeah, I think you're looking at a much larger radius of potential customers that would be more intrigued with the regional branding than the specific smaller city branding. So that's kind of our thoughts, and that's the way we're approaching it. I think it's the best way to go for sure.
Well, that sounds like an exciting project for baseball. And the media, I went to that media conference and there was a lot of support in the region. And I know you've been on CHCH a few times. So it's all looking good and good luck with it. And that wraps it up for this week's Exit Philosophy. If you want to see past exit philosophies and past columns that I've written, go to griffsthepitch.com. Don't be afraid to subscribe. And we will be back at you next week with more spring training talk, more
Yeah.
regular season talk, and maybe some roster moves that excite the fan base. Anyway, I appreciate everyone listening, and I appreciate Mal for co-hosting. And we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. See you then. See you then.